Failing Forward, Turning Mistakes into Stepping Stones for Success by John C. Maxwell. Introduction, Rethinking Failure. The difference between average people and achieving people is their perception of and response to failure. John C. Maxwell. In all my years of working with leaders, teaching, mentoring, and writing, I've come to a clear conclusion. People don't want to fail. They fear it. They avoid it. They try everything in their power to keep it from happening. But here's the truth. Failure is unavoidable. Everyone fails, some sooner, some later. Some in small ways, some in massive ways. The real issue is not whether you fail, but how you respond when you do. That's what separates those who succeed from those who get stuck in mediocrity. The people who achieve the most in life are the ones who learn how to fail forward. They don't see failure as a stop sign. They see it as a stepping stone. They don't let it define them. They let it refine them. Why we fear failure. Why is it that failure creates so much anxiety? So much hesitation? Because most people have the wrong idea of what failure is. We've been taught that failure is the opposite of success. But that's simply not true. Failure isn't the opposite of success, it's a necessary part of it. It's the training ground. It's the place where character is built, not broken. The problem is never the failure itself. The problem is that most people never learn how to respond to it productively. They get discouraged. They quit. They start to believe that failing makes them a failure. But hear me now. You are not your failure. Your mistakes don't define your identity. They define your learning curve. The Failing Forward Mindset. In this audiobook, you're going to learn how to think differently about failure. You're going to see that it's not a reason to stop. It's a reason to start again, better. You'll begin to understand that failure isn't personal, unless you make it that way. That failure isn't final, unless you choose not to grow. And that failure isn't the enemy, it's the doorway to your next breakthrough. Too many people never fulfill their potential, not because they're not capable, but because they're afraid to try again after they fall. That's why I wrote this book. To help you fail forward. To give you the tools to recover, rebuild, and rise, every time life knocks you down. You'll discover what separates achievers from average people. Why your mindset matters more than your circumstances. How to bounce back from even the most painful setbacks. And how to turn every mistake into a lesson that moves you forward. This isn't about avoiding failure. It's about making failure your friend. Because when you do that, when you stop running from it, and start learning from it, you open the door to the life you were meant to live. You begin to fail forward. And that's when the real success begins. Now hit the subscribe button and let's begin. Part 1, Reframing Failure. Chapter 1, What's the main difference between people who achieve and people who are average? According to John C. Maxwell, the biggest difference between high achievers and average people has little to do with intelligence, background, or luck. The true difference? It's how they view and respond to failure. In Failing Forward, Maxwell explains that successful people don't avoid failure. In fact, they experience it often. What separates them is that they learn from failure, use it, and most importantly, they keep moving forward. This is what he calls failing forward. Failure isn't something that only happens to others. It happens to everyone. What matters is not whether you fail, but whether you see failure as a final defeat, or a valuable part of your growth. Average people tend to avoid failure at all costs. When it comes, they internalize it. They see it as a sign that they are not good enough, not capable enough, not cut out for success. But Maxwell points out that achievers have a very different mindset. They see failure not as a stop sign, but as a stepping stone. Here's what they understand. Failure is not personal. Failure is not permanent. Failure is not a label. Failure is simply a lesson. They don't dwell on what went wrong. Instead, they focus on what comes next. Maxwell emphasizes that achievers are forward-focused. They are willing to stumble, as long as they can get back up with new wisdom. They don't get trapped in regret. They don't allow mistakes to define them. They fail fast, they fail smart, and most importantly, they fail forward. John Maxwell makes this clear. The people who accomplish the most in life are not those who've avoided failure. They're the ones who've walked through it, learned from it, and continued growing in spite of it. He writes, "The difference between average people and achieving people is their perception of and response to failure. So if you've failed before, good. You're not behind. You're in the company of every person who's ever done something significant. The question now is, what will you do with it? Will you let it stop you, or shape you? Will you get stuck in it, or move forward because of it? That's the real test. Not the failure, but your response." As you'll see throughout this audiobook, Maxwell believes that every failure is packed with opportunity. And the people who succeed? They're the ones who reach in and pull out the lesson, then keep going. They're the ones who choose to fail forward. Chapter 2: Get a new definition of failure and success. Most people mistakenly believe that success means not failing. But that's not true. In fact, one of the most harmful misconceptions in life is the belief that success and failure are opposites. That they live on opposite ends of a straight line, and that any failure automatically pulls you further away from success. But Maxwell invites us to think differently. He proposes that success and failure don't exist on opposite sides, they exist on the same path. And failure is simply part of the process. The problem with the old definition. According to Maxwell, the traditional definition of success is flawed. We're taught to believe that success means avoiding mistakes. Success means winning every time. Success means having the perfect plan and flawless execution. But in reality, this mindset causes people to play small. It creates fear. It paralyzes decision-making. And it discourages learning. Because if success means never failing, then one misstep feels like the end of the road. But the truth is, no one achieves anything meaningful without failing along the way. Every great inventor, leader, entrepreneur, or artist has a long list of setbacks behind their most celebrated moments. The secret isn't perfection. The secret is progress. A new definition of success and failure. So, what's the better definition? Maxwell suggests this. Success is not avoiding failure. Success is learning, growing, and improving, even when you fail. In other words, success is the result of good judgment. Good judgment is the result of experience. And experience is often the result of bad judgment. You don't grow when everything goes right. You grow when you struggle, when you reflect, and when you respond well to what didn't go as planned. That's how you turn failure into fuel. By shifting the definition of success from no mistakes to continuous growth, and redefining failure not as a dead end, but as forward motion. Progress over perfection. This mindset change unlocks something powerful. It removes the shame. It removes the fear. And it allows you to approach every opportunity, even risky ones, with confidence. Because now, the worst-case scenario isn't failure. The worst-case scenario is not learning. If you grow, you win. If you learn, you win. If you rise again, you win. Maxwell writes that people who achieve the most are not the ones with perfect records. They're the ones with the most resilience, and the most willingness to grow. What this means for you. So ask yourself, how have you been defining success? Is it about the outcome? Or is it about who you're becoming? Are you afraid of failing? Or excited to grow through it? Here's what John Maxwell would remind you. Success is not a destination. It's a journey of growth. And failure? It's not a disqualification. It's a qualification for those who are willing to fail forward. Chapter 3: If you've failed, are you a failure? John Maxwell confronts one of the most damaging lies we believe. If I've failed, then I must be a failure. But he makes something very clear. Failure is an event, not a person. Your failures are not your identity. Maxwell explains that people who internalize failure, those who attach it to their self-worth, often get stuck. Not because they're incapable of success, but because they've mistaken a moment for a label. Behavior is not identity. Every person experiences failure. But not everyone draws the same conclusion from it. Some say, I missed the mark, therefore I must be defective. I lost, therefore I must be a loser. I made a mistake, therefore I must be a mistake. That's the inner dialogue of someone who confuses behavior with identity. Maxwell urges us to separate the two. You are not your mistake. You are not your disappointment. You are not your worst day. What went wrong in your life doesn't define who you are, unless you let it. Failure says, I did something wrong. Shame says, I am something wrong. There's a big difference between healthy failure and crippling shame. Healthy failure says, I did something wrong. What can I learn? Shame says, I am something wrong. I'll never get it right. Maxwell warns that when failure becomes personal, it becomes paralyzing. He tells the story of highly capable individuals who stopped pursuing their dreams, not because they lacked talent, but because they believed failure was proof they didn't belong. That's what happens when failure gets inside your identity. An example from Maxwell's own life. In the book, Maxwell shares about his early years in leadership. There were times he made poor decisions, faced rejection, and doubted his calling. But he learned something powerful. He could fail at something, and still grow. He could miss an opportunity, and still move forward. He could be wrong in a moment, and still be right for the mission. Your value doesn't change just because your plan didn't work out. You are not what went wrong. You are what you choose to do next. The path forward. So what do you do if you've failed? First, take ownership, but not identity. Learn from the mistake, but don't live in it. Refuse to let a setback become your name tag. Maxwell says it best. Failure is simply the price we pay to achieve success. If you've failed, good. That means you're trying. That means you're human. That means you have something to learn, and somewhere to go. But you are not a failure. Because failing doesn't make you one. Quitting on yourself does. And you haven't quit. Chapter 4. You're too old to cry, but it hurts too much to laugh. In Chapter 4 of Failing Forward, John C. Maxwell takes us into a more vulnerable space, the emotional side of failure. The title says it all. You're too old to cry, but it hurts too much to laugh. That's how failure often feels. Embarrassing. Frustrating. Heavy. And if we're being honest, it hurts. Maxwell points out that many people try to ignore that pain. They pretend it doesn't exist. They brush it off and move on, thinking they're being strong. But here's the truth he teaches. Ignoring the emotional impact of failure doesn't make it go away. It just buries it deeper, until it surfaces later as fear, bitterness, or paralysis. Why acknowledging the pain matters. Maxwell emphasizes that failure has a cost, and not just in outcomes. It affects our confidence. It bruises our ego. It shakes our belief in ourselves. And pretending otherwise doesn't help. In fact, suppressing the emotional impact of failure keeps us from growing. It robs us of the chance to reflect and reset. There is no shame in admitting that it hurts. What matters is what you do with that pain. Will you hide from it? Or will you let it refine you? The problem with pretending. Many people pretend failure doesn't bother them. They put on a brave face. They say, I'm fine, even when they're devastated. But as Maxwell explains, this kind of pretending slows your recovery. Because when you don't process the pain of failure, you never actually deal with it. You don't learn. You don't grow. You don't move forward. You just carry it silently, and eventually it weighs you down. That's why facing failure honestly is not weakness. It's wisdom. It's how you keep failure from owning you. Healthy grief leads to growth. When failure comes, and it will, give yourself permission to feel the loss. Not to wallow. Not to give up. But to acknowledge that something you wanted didn't happen, and that matters. Grieve what needs to be grieved. Then choose to grow. Pain is not the end. It's the beginning of depth, if you let it take you deeper. It builds empathy. It builds clarity. It builds resilience. But only when you face it head on. Healing is part of failing forward. The only way to fail forward is to walk through the failure, not around it. You can't laugh your way out of pain. You can't ignore your way into progress. But you can process the pain and let it make you stronger. Yes, failure hurts. But hurt is not the end. Healing begins when honesty begins. And when you're willing to face the truth, you unlock the strength to rise again. Chapter 5. No matter what happens to you, failure is an inside job. Failure happens to everyone. But the people who grow from it, they understand something powerful. It's not what happens to you that shapes your future. It's what happens in you. This is the heartbeat of Chapter 5 in Failing Forward. Let's be honest, it's easy to blame circumstances. It's easy to say, I failed because of what happened to me. The company let me go. The market changed. Someone betrayed my trust. The opportunity just didn't work out. But if failure only lived in your environment, then your future would always be out of your hands. That's why Maxwell says, failure is an inside job. It starts with your response. Bad things happen. Setbacks come. People disappoint. But the real question isn't what happened, it's, what am I going to do about it? The difference between those who stay stuck and those who rise? Responsibility. Not blame. Not shame. But ownership. Because when you own your response, you reclaim your power. You can't always control what happens. But you can always control what it means to you. And that's where freedom lives. Victim thinking versus ownership thinking. Let's break this down. Victim thinking says, this always happens to me. There's nothing I can do. It's their fault, not mine. Ownership thinking says, this happened, but I get to choose what happens next. I may not be at fault, but I'm still responsible for my future. I can learn, adjust, and grow, starting now. Every great leader, every resilient person, had to make that shift. They didn't wait for perfect circumstances. They chose to lead themselves through the chaos. And that choice, more than anything else, is what determines whether failure will break you or build you. It's not the fall. It's the frame. Two people can go through the same setback and come out with two completely different futures. Why? Because of the frame they used. One person sees failure as a signal to stop. The other sees it as a signal to start again, wiser. That's the internal difference. And it's a difference that lives in the heart, not in the headlines. It's the voice that says, I will not be defined by what just happened. I will be shaped by how I respond. That's where failure shifts. That's when it stops being final and starts becoming fuel. Your inner world shapes your outer results. Maxwell teaches that successful people understand this law. Your inner world drives your outer results. If you believe you're powerless, you'll give up too early. If you believe you're a failure, you'll settle for less. But if you believe failure is part of growth, you'll rise again and again. Responsibility isn't just a principle. It's a strategy for resilience. Because when you take ownership, you get traction. You stop waiting for change and start becoming the change. So here's the shift. From, why did this happen to me? To, what can I learn from this? From, it's over. To, I'm just getting started. From reacting to responding. No matter what's happened to you, no matter what you've lost or missed, failure isn't the end of your story. Unless you hand it the pen. Maxwell says it best. You are the only person who can label what happens to you as failure. So take the pen back. Write something new. And keep moving forward. Chapter 6. How to Exit the Failure Freeway. There's a reason John Maxwell calls this chapter, How to Exit the Failure Freeway. Because sometimes failure isn't just a one-time moment. It's a pattern. A habit. A loop. A familiar road that keeps taking you somewhere you don't want to be. And yet you keep driving it. Why? Because it's what you know. But here's the truth, just because failure is familiar, doesn't mean it's your fate. You don't have to stay stuck in cycles. You can exit the freeway. You can change direction, starting now. The pattern of repeated failure. Maxwell explains that people often get trapped in failure because they never stop to analyze their patterns. They react, instead of reflect. They repeat, instead of revise. And slowly, a single failure becomes a lifestyle. It shows up in the person who always blames others, chooses comfort over growth, ignores feedback, refuses to adapt. And before long, failure becomes more than a result. It becomes an identity. But it doesn't have to. How do you know you're on the failure freeway? 1. You make the same mistakes over and over. 2. You don't evaluate what went wrong, you just move on. 3. You resist new input and cling to old ways. 4. You feel stuck, but can't name why. 5. You blame circumstances more than you take responsibility. These aren't character flaws, they're wake-up calls. If you recognize yourself here, don't panic. It just means it's time for a better route. Exiting the freeway starts with awareness. Every turnaround begins with a decision. I'm not going to drive this road anymore. You can't change what you don't confront. And you can't confront what you won't name. The exit is always there, you just have to be willing to take it. That means asking hard questions, breaking denial, listening to feedback, and being willing to do something different. You don't need a whole new life. You need a new choice, repeated daily. The 5 exit ramps Maxwell recommends. If you're ready to exit the failure freeway, here are 5 steps. 1. Take responsibility for your life. No more blame. No more excuses. Own the journey. 2. Stop repeating the same behavior. You can't change outcomes if you keep rehearsing the same decisions. 3. Put past failures in perspective. Learn what you can, but stop living in yesterday. 4. Develop a new plan. Success is intentional. It needs direction, not just hope. 5. Start making better decisions today. You can't fix the past, but you can redeem the future. You don't escape failure by running from it. You escape it by outgrowing it. Failure doesn't end your story, unless you refuse to change the page. Here's what this chapter ultimately teaches. You can stay on the road you're on. Or you can decide that your destination is worth a detour. And detours? They're uncomfortable. They require humility. But they lead you somewhere new. You are one decision away from heading in a better direction. You've seen where the freeway leads. Now, take the exit. Take the lesson. And take back the wheel. Chapter 7. Is the past holding your life hostage? Sometimes the most powerful thing standing between you and your future isn't failure. It's memory. John Maxwell asks a piercing question. Is the past holding your life hostage? Regret. Guilt. Shame. Missed opportunities. Mistakes that still echo in your heart. It's not what's happening to you now. It's what you won't let go of from back then. The past has power. Only if you give it permission. Carrying the weight you don't have to carry. Maxwell explains that many people fail, not because they lack talent, vision, or opportunity, but because they are emotionally tied to a past they can't change. They rehearse old mistakes. They replay bad decisions. They relive pain from years ago as if it happened yesterday. It becomes a burden they carry into every new opportunity. And slowly, they stop trying. Not because the dream is gone, but because they don't believe they deserve it anymore. Shame is a quiet thief. It tells you, you blew it once, you'll blow it again. It whispers, you don't get another shot. It binds you to a failure that should have been finished. Freedom begins with forgiveness. If the past is holding you hostage, the key to your freedom isn't success. It's forgiveness. Forgiveness for others, yes. But most importantly, for yourself. Release the grip of regret. To stop punishing ourselves for mistakes we've already learned from. To stop carrying guilt for a version of ourselves that doesn't exist anymore. You can't start your next chapter if you're still rereading the last one. Moving forward requires you to let go. Here's the truth John Maxwell delivers. You don't get a better future by clinging to a broken past. You get it by making peace with where you've been. So you can move toward where you're meant to go. That doesn't mean forgetting. It means reframing. It means looking at your past and saying, "That taught me something. That season shaped me, but it doesn't define me. I may have failed there, but I'm moving forward here." From prison to platform. Your failure doesn't have to be a prison. It can be a platform. Maxwell reminds us, the people who have the most to teach are often the ones who have walked through the deepest valleys. If you'll let go of shame, you'll gain wisdom. You'll gain freedom. You'll gain the clarity to move without fear. You are not your past. You are not your worst moment. You are not what you regret. You are what you choose next. And that choice is still yours. Before we begin Chapter 8 so far, if you've been getting value out of this audiobook, support our channel by hitting the subscribe button. Give this audiobook a like and share it with friends who need encouragement. Thank you for your support, and now let's continue. Chapter 8. Who is this person making these mistakes? People who do not take time for self-examination will never reach their potential. John C. Maxwell. If we want to grow, if we want to rise from our failures, we must be willing to take a closer look at ourselves. Because here's the truth. Failure doesn't just happen in the environment. It happens in the mirror. The question is not just, what went wrong? It's, who am I becoming through this? Growth begins with honest self-evaluation. One of the most important steps in failing forward is self-awareness. Not self-punishment. Not self-loathing. But honest, humble self-evaluation. The kind of self-reflection that asks, what patterns am I repeating? What beliefs are holding me back? Where am I getting in my own way? If you don't take time to examine your thinking, your habits, your responses, then failure will visit again and again. Because you'll never see it coming. But when you start paying attention to you, you become empowered. Failure becomes a feedback loop. Every mistake becomes a moment of instruction. You can't grow who you don't know. Maxwell points out something crucial. Many people want to grow, but they've never taken the time to understand themselves. They want to change results, without changing habits. They want different outcomes, without different inputs. They want transformation, without reflection. But real growth doesn't begin with action. It begins with awareness. And that awareness is rooted in one powerful question. Who is this person making these mistakes? What's in the mirror? This chapter invites us to look inward, not to find blame, but to find clarity. What if your greatest breakthrough doesn't come from fixing something out there, but from learning something in here? Maybe it's your mindset. Maybe it's your reactions. Maybe it's your fears. Self-awareness isn't always easy, but it's always worth it. Because when you know where the cracks are, you can start building something solid. And when you understand the person making the decisions, you can start changing the decisions. From mistake maker to growth seeker. Maxwell doesn't ask us to be perfect. He asks us to be intentional. You're going to mess up. That's a given. But what if every mistake became a mirror? And every mirror became a moment of maturity? That's what growth looks like. Not pretending to be flawless, but learning to be self-aware and forward-facing. So don't run from your reflection. Study it. Learn from it. And grow through it. Because the person staring back at you, they are not the mistake. They are the solution. Chapter 9. Get over yourself. Everyone else has. The ability to laugh at yourself is the sign of mental health. John C. Maxwell. There's something liberating about admitting you're not perfect. Admission is the first step to real growth. The title of this chapter is playful, but it cuts deep. Get over yourself, everyone else has. Maxwell is telling us that one of the greatest obstacles to learning from failure is ego. That part of us that wants to appear untouchable. That part that says, I can't mess up. I shouldn't make mistakes. But here's the truth. You're not perfect. Neither is anyone else. And pretending you are is exhausting. Perfectionism builds walls. Maxwell explains that perfectionism doesn't just keep others at arm's length, it keeps you from moving forward. Why? Because perfectionists don't see mistakes as feedback. They see them as threats. So they hide. They pretend. They cover. And worst of all, they miss the lessons in the fall. Growth requires openness. And perfectionism slams that door shut. If you want to fail forward, you have to stop guarding your image. And start being real with yourself. Vulnerability opens the door to breakthrough. Maxwell suggests a better way. Let go of the need to be flawless. Embrace the freedom of vulnerability. That doesn't mean oversharing. It means being honest about your weaknesses, your limitations, and your learning curve. It's being okay with, I don't know yet. It's saying, I messed that up, but I'm working on it. It's asking for help, not because you're weak, but because you're wise. Vulnerability isn't a liability. It's a bridge between who you are and who you're becoming. Learn to laugh at yourself. One of the healthiest things you can do? Don't take yourself so seriously. The ability to laugh at yourself is a sign of mental strength. When you can look at your past mistakes and say, yeah, I did that. And I've grown since. You've disarmed the shame. You've taken back your power. Failure can still teach you something. But it can't control you anymore. That's the gift of humility. That's the freedom of getting over yourself. Who's holding you back? If you're stuck, it might not be the situation. It might not be the people. It might be your pride. The need to look good. To be right. To be beyond failure. But growth comes after surrender. Not before it. So take off the mask. Lay down the pressure. And allow yourself to be in process. You're human. And the more you admit that, the more powerful you become. Chapter 10. Grasp the positive benefits of negative experiences. Life's greatest lessons are gained from our losses. John C. Maxwell. If you've failed, you've gained something. Whether or not you realize it yet, that experience came with a hidden deposit. Every negative experience holds a positive benefit, but only for those who are willing to mine for it. Pain is a teacher. Loss is a laboratory. And failure is a master class in what works, what doesn't, and who you really are. But here's the catch. The lesson isn't automatic. You have to look for it. You have to extract it. You have to choose to learn from it. Mining the lesson in pain. Maxwell compares growth through failure to mining gold. It's not lying on the surface. You have to dig for it. It takes effort. It takes time. And it takes perspective. You can either see the failure as a dead end, or as a deposit of truth, insight, and growth. There's something valuable in your disappointment. There's clarity in your crash. There's wisdom in your wound. If you don't waste it. The reflection gap. Maxwell introduces a concept he calls the reflection gap, the time between when something happens and when we extract meaning from it. Most people don't pause long enough to learn. They move too quickly. They bury the pain. They miss the message. But people who fail forward make a habit of asking, what did this teach me about myself? What systems or habits broke down? What truth did I need to confront? How can I prevent this from happening again? This is what separates people who repeat mistakes from people who rise from them. Pain can be productive. Here's a shift. Stop seeing pain as punishment. Start seeing it as preparation. Your setback might be developing patience, humility, emotional strength, new priorities, better decision-making. Pain shapes people in a way that comfort never can. But only when you're willing to feel it, face it, and grow through it. That's the opportunity every failure brings. Lessons hidden in losses. Maxwell doesn't romanticize failure. He doesn't say it's fun. But he insists, it can be fruitful. Some of the most transformative lessons you'll ever learn won't come from success. They'll come from being humbled, missing the mark, being forced to reevaluate, learning to rebuild. Failure doesn't feel good. But it often leads somewhere good, if you walk with eyes open. Don't waste your failure. Here's the takeaway from this chapter. Don't let your failure go to waste. If you're going to go through the pain, get the benefit. Get the lesson. Get the growth. Because that's how people who fail forward rise. They make every loss count. They turn every bruise into a blueprint. And they let every setback build something better inside them. There's value in your failure. You just have to dig for it. And when you do, you'll find something stronger than success. Wisdom. Chapter 11. Take a risk. There's no other way to fail forward. People who don't take risks generally make about 2 big mistakes a year. People who do take risks generally make about 2 big mistakes a year. Peter Drucker. If you want to grow, there's no getting around this. You're going to have to take a risk. There is no forward progress without the willingness to step into uncertainty. Success doesn't come from playing it safe. It comes from courageously embracing discomfort, the kind that sharpens your thinking and stretches your limits. Yes, risk might lead to failure. But avoiding risk guarantees something even worse: stagnation. Fear guards the gate to growth. Fear is the gatekeeper of every next level of your life. That means, the job you want? It's behind fear. The relationship that will grow you? Behind fear. The opportunity that feels bigger than you? Also behind fear. He teaches that people often get stuck because they let fear of failure outweigh their hope for impact. But growth doesn't come from safety. It comes from stepping into the unknown with intention. Risk versus recklessness. Let's make a distinction here. Maxwell doesn't encourage recklessness. He's not talking about gambling your future. He's talking about calculated, courageous decisions that stretch your limits and teach you something new. There's a difference between leaping without looking and looking, preparing, and then leaping anyway. Risk is not reckless, it's necessary. It's how you test ideas. It's how you build resilience. It's how you learn what works and what doesn't. Avoiding risk doesn't eliminate failure, it delays growth. People who take risks make about as many big mistakes as those who don't. But here's the difference. The risk takers gain wisdom, momentum, and new opportunities. The risk avoiders gain regret. When you play it too safe, you may avoid immediate pain, but you also avoid deep fulfillment. Failure is the tuition you pay for long-term growth. And risk? That's the application form. The risk is worth the reward. Every successful person you admire has one thing in common. They took a risk. They started something before they felt ready. They launched the idea others doubted. They walked away from comfort, toward calling. Growth lives on the edge of your comfort zone. And you'll never fail forward if you're not willing to move toward the edge. The unknown is where transformation begins. What's the risk you've been avoiding? Let's get practical. Right now, there's probably a decision sitting in front of you. A risk that feels inconvenient, uncomfortable, even scary. Ask yourself, is it time to have the hard conversation? Launch the project? Make the shift you've been delaying? Don't wait for permission. Don't wait for perfection. Don't wait until the fear disappears. Walk through it anyway. Because everything you want is on the other side of a risk. And the sooner you take it, the sooner you start growing. Chapter 12. Make failure your best friend. The difference between greatness and mediocrity is often how an individual views a mistake. Nelson Boswell. What if failure didn't feel like a threat? What if, instead of running from it, you learned to walk with it? Reimagine your relationship with failure, not as an enemy to avoid, but as a friend to trust. Because when you stop fearing failure, you start learning faster. You grow deeper. You become unstoppable. Failure is feedback, if you let it be. Failure is not final. It's feedback. Mistakes, setbacks, and missteps. They're not signs to stop. They're signals to adjust. And the sooner you learn to listen to those signals, the more quickly you move forward. Every failure has something to teach you. But it won't shout. You have to lean in and listen. Learning from losses, again and again. People who fail forward understand something essential. They don't learn in spite of failure. They learn because of it. Maxwell highlights that great leaders, innovators, and mentors all share this trait. They've made peace with mistakes. They don't deny failure. They embrace it. They ask, "What is this trying to teach me? Where did my assumptions break down? What can I do better next time?" This is what builds long-term success. Not one-time wins, but lifetime lessons. How to develop a lifelong learning mindset. You can't grow without failing. But you also can't grow without reflecting. Here's how people who make failure their friend think. 1. They stay curious. They never stop asking questions, even after setbacks. 2. They stay humble. They don't pretend to have it all figured out. 3. They stay consistent. They review, revise, and recommit daily. They don't wait for growth to happen. They partner with it, through every disappointment and every lesson. Make failure a tool, not a trauma. Failure doesn't have to scar you. It can shape you. When you see it as part of your learning rhythm, when it becomes normal, not shameful, you stop overreacting to it, and you start leveraging it. That's what it means to make failure your best friend. Not because it's comfortable, but because it's valuable. It will tell you the truth. It will point out your blind spots. It will stretch you where comfort never could. So here's the real question. Are you still resisting failure? Or are you ready to befriend it? The more you treat failure as a friend, the more likely you are to learn, grow, and succeed. So stop hiding from your mistakes. Start harvesting the lessons inside them. Failure is not trying to hurt you. It's trying to help you become better. Let it. Learn from it. Grow with it. Chapter 13. Avoid the top 10 reasons people fail. 90% of all those who fail are not actually defeated. They simply quit. Paul J. Meyer. Failure doesn't always come from one big mistake. Often, it comes from small patterns repeated over time. In this chapter, John Maxwell pulls back the curtain on the 10 most common reasons people fail. These are not just random missteps. They're predictable traps. And if you can learn to spot them, you can learn to avoid them. Because sometimes, success isn't about doing more. It's about stopping what's hurting you. Reason number 1. Poor people skills. If you struggle to connect with people, you will eventually hit a ceiling. People who succeed long-term know how to listen well, communicate clearly, value others consistently. Growth depends on relationships. And relationships depend on people's skills. Reason number 2. A negative attitude. Failure thrives in a negative environment. Attitude is more important than skill, background, or opportunity. Why? Because a negative attitude filters everything through fear, limitation, and blame. If you want to fail forward, you must leave with optimism, not cynicism. Reason number 3. A bad fit. Sometimes, failure happens because you're climbing the wrong ladder. Success isn't just about working hard. It's about finding the place where your gifts and passion align with your role. When you're doing the wrong thing, even if you're doing it well, you'll eventually burn out. Reason number 4. Lack of focus. Distraction is the silent killer of progress. People who never learn to focus will never maximize their potential. Success requires priorities, boundaries, discipline. If everything matters, nothing does. Reason number 5. Weak commitment. Half-hearted effort leads to half-developed results. Commitment isn't a feeling, it's a decision to keep going even when the feeling fades. The moment you decide to go all in, you stop negotiating with fear. Reason number 6. Unwillingness to change. Growth demands change. And if you resist it, you'll stall out, fast. You can't become someone new while clinging to who you were. Adaptation isn't optional. It's essential. Reason number 7. Shortcuts. Everyone wants to win. If you want to take the long road there, shortcuts often lead to shallow routes and unstable success. Real growth takes time, effort, integrity. If it's worth doing, it's worth doing well. Reason number 8. Relying on talent alone. Talent might get you started, but it won't keep you going. Hard work, consistency, and growth mindsets outperform raw talent every time. Never let your gift outgrow your character. Reason number 9. a response to poor information. Sometimes, people fail because they act on bad advice, incomplete data, or outdated assumptions. Vet your sources, question your inputs, and stay teachable. Success requires clarity, and clarity comes from accurate information. Reason number 10: no goals. Here's the big one. You can't hit a target you never defined. Many people fail because they never clarified what they wanted. Goals provide direction. Without them, you drift. If you don't define success for yourself, failure will define it for you. How to correct the pattern. Here's how you stop the sabotage. Get honest about where you're slipping. Seek feedback. Stay humble. Stay hungry. And most of all, stay committed to growth. These 10 traps don't have to define you. They're not fate. They're just patterns. And patterns can be changed. One decision at a time. Chapter 14. The little difference between failure and success makes a big difference. The secret of your success is determined by your daily agenda. John C. Maxwell. Big change doesn't always require big actions. Sometimes, the smallest shifts create the largest results, over time. The little difference between success and failure isn't talent, isn't luck, isn't opportunity. It's often something much smaller, but far more powerful: your daily habits. Success and failure aren't events, they're accumulations. Both success and failure are rarely the result of one dramatic moment. They are the result of daily decisions, repeated over time. The habit of taking shortcuts. The habit of blaming others. The habit of learning from mistakes. The habit of finishing what you start. These habits either compound toward your progress or accumulate toward your setbacks. The compound effect of attitude. Attitude is a small thing that makes a big difference. Not just how you feel in the moment, but how you approach the world, every day. People with a failure-focused mindset expect disappointment. Avoid risks. See setbacks as personal. But people with a success-oriented mindset expect to grow. Take action. Learn from the loss. Your attitude doesn't guarantee results, but it determines how long you'll stay in the game. And that alone makes a massive difference. Discipline multiplies over time. You don't need to master everything today. You just need to master your decisions today. Discipline isn't glamorous, but it's the daily non-negotiable that builds lasting achievement. Showing up when it's inconvenient. Finishing when you feel like quitting. Choosing growth over comfort. These don't feel powerful in the moment, but do them consistently, and you'll change your trajectory. A 1% shift can change everything. Here's the heart of this chapter. You don't need a total life overhaul. You just need a few small changes in attitude, focus, habits, reactions. Even a 1% difference, if applied daily, compounds into exponential growth. Because a life of failure doesn't come from one bad day, and a life of success doesn't come from one great decision. They both come from what you choose to do consistently. What will you change today? So here's the question. What small habit is hurting your momentum? What mindset shift could change how you handle setbacks? What daily discipline have you been putting off? Success is built in inches, not miles. And failure is prevented in moments, not miracles. The little difference? It's yours to make. And if you make it daily, it will make all the difference. Chapter 15. It's what you do after you get back up that counts. Failure isn't the end of the world, unless you make it the end. John C. Maxwell. Everybody falls. The question is, what do you do next? While failure may knock you down, the real difference maker is what happens when you stand back up. Because success isn't about never falling. It's about learning how to rise wisely. It's what you do after you get back up that determines whether you grow or repeat the same mistake. Bounce back ability, the hidden trait of high achievers. Maxwell calls this trait resilience. Not talent, not charisma, but the ability to recover quickly from disappointment, rejection, or failure. High achievers don't bounce back because life is easier for them. They bounce back because they've learned how to reframe the experience, refocus their energy, reset their direction. They don't see failure as the opposite of success. They see it as part of the process. What matters most, the next move. Failure isn't final unless you fail to take the next right step. He shares that successful people don't get stuck asking, "Why did this happen to me? Whose fault was it? What does this say about me?" Instead, they ask, "What can I learn? What can I change? Where do I go from here?" They don't stay on the ground. They get up with a plan. Your post-failure game plan. Here's the sequence after any failure. 1. Acknowledge the mistake. Honesty is the beginning of growth. 2. Accept responsibility. No excuses, no blame shifting. 3. Analyze what went wrong. Look at patterns, not just the moment. 4. Adjust your mindset and methods. Commit to learning, not just surviving. 5. Act again. Take a new step, no matter how small. Getting up is good. But what you do after you get up, that's what writes your story. Repeat the process. Failing forward isn't a one-time principle, it's a lifestyle. Every time you fall, you're given a choice. Stay down and shrink back. Or get up and step forward, smarter, stronger, and more committed. Each comeback becomes part of your credibility. Each recovery builds momentum. Each restart increases your resilience. That's how leaders are made. So, what will you do now? You've failed before. That's a fact. The next chapter of your story depends on how you answer this question. Now that you're back up, what's your next move? Will you hesitate? Or will you grow? Will you carry shame? Or will you carry wisdom? You've got what it takes to move forward. You've proven it by getting back up. Now, prove it by what you do next. Chapter 16. Now you're ready to fail forward. The difference between average people and achieving people is their perception of and response to failure. John C. Maxwell. You've come a long way. From confronting failure, to reframing it, to turning it into your greatest teacher. It's time to stop treating failure as a single moment, and start living with a failing forward mindset. Because failing forward isn't just a principle. It's a posture, a decision, a daily way of showing up to your life. From reaction to rhythm. Most people respond to failure emotionally. They react. They retreat. They let it define them. But those who fail forward, who really build momentum over time, don't see failure as something to avoid. They see it as part of their rhythm. They expect it. They prepare for it. And they use it. Failure becomes part of the feedback loop of personal growth. That's when the shift happens, from surviving failure to strategically using it. Failing forward is a way of life. So what does a fail-forward life actually look like? It's about taking risks when others play it safe, owning your mistakes before blaming others, asking hard questions after every setback, showing up every day ready to grow, not just succeed. It's about doing the hard things even when you're not sure they'll work out. Because you know even failure moves you forward if you stay committed to the process. Failing forward is a decision you make every single day. Daily decisions that lead to significance. Greatness doesn't happen in leaps. It happens in small, intentional choices made daily. The choice to try again. The choice to take responsibility. The choice to reflect. The choice to keep moving. The choice to help others through your experience. These are the decisions that build a meaningful life. Not just one filled with success, but with significance. Your life is bigger than a single failure. The message is simple, but it's powerful. You will fail again. You will face resistance again. But you are now equipped to see it differently, to use it wisely, and to move through it intentionally. You are not fragile. You are not stuck. And you are not defined by what you've lost. You are defined by what you do next. Make it a movement. Maxwell doesn't end this book with steps. He ends it with a challenge. Don't just keep this for yourself. Teach it. Model it. Share it. Let your story of failing forward become fuel for someone else's future. This is not the end. It's a beginning. You're now ready to fail forward. Not perfectly, but purposefully. And in doing so, you'll build something greater than success. You'll build a life of significance. Conclusion: the forward life. Let's take a moment to reflect. Failure is not the end. It's the beginning. Not a signal to stop, but a signal to learn, to adjust, and to grow. Here's what you've learned. You've discovered that failure is not the opposite of success, but part of it. Not a verdict on your value, but a tool for your growth. Not a wall, but a doorway. Not something to hide, but something to use. You've learned to redefine failure. It's feedback, not final. Take responsibility. Growth always begins with ownership. Growth through experience, especially the ones that hurt. This isn't just about bouncing back. It's about building forward. One last challenge. So now, one question remains. What will you fail forward into? What bold step have you been avoiding? What conversation, commitment, or change have you delayed, because of fear? Let this moment be your new line in the sand. You've been equipped. You've been challenged. Now you're ready. Don't aim for a life of perfection. Aim for a life of progress. And let every misstep move you closer to your mission. Keep the forward life alive. If this audiobook spoke to you, don't keep it to yourself. Share it with someone who needs encouragement. Subscribe to this channel for more full audiobooks and growth tools. Leave a comment with your biggest takeaway, and let's build a community of people who are learning to fail forward together. Because the world doesn't need more perfect people. It needs more people who are willing to keep going. People like you. Thank you for listening to Failing Forward by John C. Maxwell. Remember, your next failure doesn't disqualify you. It prepares you. Now go. Grow. And fail forward.